The man, the myth, the mouth. Dan Patrick. Weekdays 9 until noon on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio.
Tri-City Sports Now, I'm Marky Billson. I used to cover the Pittsburgh Steelers with this gentleman here. His name is Jim Wexell. He's been covering the Steelers for quite some time. Now for a website, Steel City Insider, and of course he's got a lot of outlets that he writes on covering the Steelers and such. But recently, on June 30th, he wrote a story that really caught my eye because of the local interest that it had. Devlin Hodges, in the last game of the football season, at least for ETSU's regular season, broke Steve McNair's FCS career passing record. You know that. We were promoting that and really following it all throughout that football season and such. But now he's signed a free agent contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that means ultimately he's going to be competing with Josh Dobbs, former four-year starter at Tennessee, for a backup spot on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Jim Wexell, who wrote the story that you can read, record-setting rookie QB Hodges just one spot away from Steelers' spot. But I got to ask you, you're talking about a rookie free agent that's going up against last year's second-string quarterback Josh Dobbs, who's a fourth-round draft choice just 2 years ago, and last year's third-round pick Mason Rudolph. I believe together combined they make almost $7 million or so. Does Hodges have a chance to become a fourth-string quarterback, to knock out one of these young draft choices and become a backup quarterback with the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, in early July, you never say never about anyone's chances. But, man, it would take a long shot, and I presume it would take an injury. Not just to Josh, but to any of the three quarterbacks. And he would also have to have, I'm talking about Devlin Hodges, would also have had to prove that he could do this job, and then the Steelers wouldn't go out and pick up their third quarterback off the waiver wire. So it's a long shot, but he's in camp, and, the process is underway. Devlin Hodges came as a rookie minicamp invite, so he wasn't even signed after the draft. He had to try out to make the 90-man roster before OTAs and minicamp began. And they had signed somebody out of Eastern Michigan who was kind of a darling on Hard Knocks the previous year with the Cleveland Browns, a Brogan Roback. And the Steelers and we, covering the Steelers, assumed that Roback was going to be that camp arm, that number 4 guy, but Devlin Hodges beat him out. He's showed some feistiness. He's 6'1". He's tall enough, and he started 4 years at Samford. And as you know, he broke the great Steve McNair's FCS all-time record. That probably didn't go over too well where you are, being that Steve McNair is probably still beloved in Tennessee. Devlin, I've seen worse camp arms, as they call them, number 4 quarterbacks. So he needs an injury is what it is. And, we can talk about Josh Dobbs' battle with Mason Rudolph for the number 2 spot. That's probably more realistic.
Well, yeah, I would suggest to you that probably Dobbs is more beloved in the Tri-Cities, being Upper East Tennessee, than McNair is being a Tennessee Titan, because you are talking about the local big-time college football team against, let's say, an entity that's 300 miles away from me and such. Although the Titans, in most counties in Tennessee, probably the team to watch, to get the games here on TV, the Titans, if they're on, CBS. But there's even some, anger about that for some people, that sort of thing. We're talking to Jim Wexell, Steel City Insider and such. One of the guys, though, that Hodges, late of Samford in the Southern Conference, was able to beat out was Keller Christ. Now, last year, Christ was in a quarterback competition with Jared Guarantano at the University of Tennessee. Didn't win it. His former Samford coach, David Shaw, couldn't believe it and said so. Chris did play pretty well against Alabama, at least in comparison to Guarantano. And so Chris, who Shaw had said, hey, here's a future NFL quarterback, gets the invite to the Steelers, but he loses that fourth string job, let's just say, to Hodges. What did Hodges do in minicamp that Chris didn't?
Well, there were three quarterbacks, and I can't say I watched Chris very closely.
Okay.
I assumed that that was more political because of his uncle Paul was a coach at Pitt, and Pitt works at the same facility as the Steelers.
Sure.
And the coaches get along. I mean, Mike Tomlin gets along with all the Pitt kids. He's always trying to help those guys promote their program, and he and Paul Christ we're friendly. I can't speak to the friendship because I don't know exactly, but they were friendly. They were often together talking, and so I assume that's why Keller Christ got the invite. And so, Marky, I did not watch closely enough. I was disappointed in Roback, the guy I watched more closely than him, and I really didn't begin watching Hodges until he moved up, became the number 4 guy, and Hodges has a better arm than the bigger Roback. I barely remember Chris at all. Sorry.
So, yeah, it really didn't make that much of an impact or stand out when the writers are
right.
not really, so, oh, wow, look how far he can throw the ball. Nothing like that going on with Keller Christ.
I pay closer attention than most, and I may have more innate understanding of what it takes than some of those other guys, but nothing stood out. You do see a good arm stand out, and I was surprised at Roback's wobbly passes, so I wasn't surprised when he lost his job to one of the other 2 guys.
Now, Dobbs has a lot of fans around here. I guess when he was selected by the Steelers, a lot of fans around here thought, hey, maybe he could be the guy that ultimately replaces Ben Roethlisberger. Well, Roethlisberger's going to be around for a few more seasons. At least that's what his contract says. Dobbs also, I guess he started off real well with his first pass against the Ravens when he hit Juju Schuster out of the end zone for a 22-yard strike. But after that, against Oakland, didn't play particularly well. 4 drives, didn't have any scores on the board, and that was probably as much of a reason as anything why the Steelers were upset by the Raiders last year and didn't make the playoffs. So where does Dobbs stand right now? I mean, is this a guy you feel is pretty confident of being the number 2 quarterback in Pittsburgh, or is he about ready to fall down to number 3? And I don't know, maybe Hodges from the outside, although it would take a long shot, could beat him out. What's the deal with Dobbs?
Well, he, as you said, against the Ravens, he came in, I believe, what was it, 2nd and 20, 3rd and 20? He came in for one play. Roethlisberger was hurt, and Dobbs came in, and instead of handing the ball off out of the other end zone, he threw it. I mean, he completed it for a first down, threw a bullet. I believe it was the Juju. And then he came out, and boy, that was a positive first step. And everybody made a big deal out of it. They didn't just put him in there to hand off and punt. And so then that's one step, okay. And now the second step. Roethlisberger at halftime tells them he got hit in the ribs, and they want to get him X-ray. He's not sure if it's broken, but man, it's painful. And they have to go out, and I forget how far away the X-ray machine was at Old Oakland Stadium. And it was just a mess. Other team doctors have checked in on Twitter and said, well, I hate when I have to use an X-ray machine or anything up to date medically at that stadium. It's just a mess. So as Tomlin took the team back out, Kevin Colbert resumed the run with Roethlisberger to get this X-ray, and then they couldn't read it. And so Roethlisberger makes his way out after two unsuccessful series by Dobbs. Dobbs is having trouble moving the team. But it is the Raiders, and they're within striking distance, and they don't have an X-ray result on Roethlisberger, who's telling Tomlin, I can play, okay, I can do this. But, if you have a cracked rib and you get hit again, the rib goes into your lung, who knows? Tomlin took a lot of criticism for not rushing Roethlisberger back in, but they never did read that X-ray. They never were sure that it wasn't cracked or broken or whatever. It turned out it was just bruised. But anyway, so Dobbs, what'd you say, 4 series? Most of the second half, and he couldn't move the team. And that was his time. And he didn't come through. So though he came through in one instance, in the second instance, more prolonged instance, he did not. Roethlisberger did come back in and get them down the field, but the kicker fell on his rear end with the tying kick, and they lost, and that knocked them out of the playoffs. They win that game, they go to the playoffs. So, Dobbs, he's loved in that locker room, and all you Tennessee people know why. All you Tennessee fans know why. He's just a class act, and he's a hard worker, and he's smart, and he's humble, and he gets along with teammates, and he gives credit where credit's due, and he takes the blame when it's even when it's not his fault. He takes the blame. But man, he had to sit on that, and he's still sitting on that, and it's given Mason Rudolph a good shot. I would say they're both right now even, and it means nothing because the preseason is where your backups learn. Your young backups develop and learn in the preseason. It's really the only time they have. So that's what's going to be important. Who can move the team best between those two and then gets the next shot. If Dobbs leads the team down and they beat the Raiders and he holds them off and Roethlisberger doesn't have to come back in, I would say he's definitely your second teamer right now. Rudolph would have a lot more to overcome. But right now they're even. It's just whoever can do it. And I watched Dobbs this spring, and he overthrew a screen pass badly. It reminded me of the analytics coming out. The quarterback analytics on passes from 0 to -5 yards. Dobbs was the worst of all the prospective quarterbacks in the draft. And I mean, he was fine at deep passes, fine at intermediates, outs, ins, everything. He was, he varied, ranking very high. Fourth quarter they had all the different. But man, on short passes, he just lacks the touch for whatever reason, and it's still a bugaboo with him. The real short pass, the screen pass. So I assumed that was something that he could figure out by now, but I noticed this spring there was still some really bad short passes.
Talking to Jim Wexell, he writes for Steel City Insider. He's an old friend of mine here, Marky Billson, Tri-City Sports Now. Just wrote a story on Devlin Hodges, which you can read. Record-setting rookie QB Hodges just one step away from the Steelers spot. That's on Steel City Insider. And a couple of questions that I do want to ask you here pertaining to some local interest. I do want to ask about Cody Sensabaugh, who wasn't re-signed by the Steelers. Now, he's from Kingsport. What's up with him? Why didn't the Steelers want to bring him back in 2019?
Well, he was a free agent, and they brought him in as a free agent, signed him on a couple-year deal, and he started, and he replaced Artie Burns and did not play very well. I forget who he replaced the first year of his contract. It would have been 2017. He didn't play well. Last year he replaces Artie Burns and plays well. He was a decent zone corner, and he's intelligent. He didn't hurt them. He played better than the year before, and probably remembering the year before and that he's an average corner. The Steelers weren't going to pay him much, but Sensabaugh, seeing that how well the team played in the secondary down the stretch with him as opposed to Artie Burns, probably felt he deserved a little more. But the Steelers went out shopping and brought in Steven Nelson, a more consistent corner, better man coverage guy. They want to play more man, especially against Tom Brady, who they've had some success with the last couple of years. And so Cody went away. But there are some other Tennessee kids here.
Yeah, Cam Sutton. I mean, you mentioned...
Cody was a Clemson kid.
Yeah.
We have Cam Sutton here, Dobbs, Daniel McCullers, and Ramon Foster.
Sure. Foster's been on the line since, seems like forever.
You break those guys down?
Well, I was going to ask about Sutton, what his chances are of staying with the, because he seems to have had a very quiet career in Pittsburgh, although he had a very productive one in the SEC. And I just was going to say, what's his status right now?
Well, he's a jack of all trades reserve right now, and he's the best position he plays is the nickel slot, and that's manned by Mike Hilton. And Mike's pretty good. Mike's held him off. It's going to be a competition this camp if Mike doesn't hold out. Mike is one of those. Before restricted free agency, there's it's EFA or something like that, EFRA, and you have no options, but they still call you a free agent. And if you don't sign the tag, then you can't play. You can't play anywhere. Well, Hilton's making a little noise. He would like a little more money, and I hope he realizes he has no options. But if he does hold out, then Cam Sutton has that job, and that's another thing keeping Mike from making extra money. Is that they have a reserve in Cam Sutton who can play. Cam's also a reserve dime linebacker, which he was a little out of position. I mean, he's not an inside linebacker, and that's when they're 3rd and 10. And Cam had to fill in last year for Morgan Burnett, and this year they went out and got from the Rams Mark Barron. And those are money backers. Those are dime backers, converted safeties, and Sutton's learning that position. Whether he's physical enough to actually handle it is something else. And they can also play outside. And I believe when push comes to shove, he's going to be their backup's free safety because he's a smart player. All Tennessee fans know Cam's a really smart, intuitive player. So I think he's the backup free safety. Although Jordan Dangerfield right now on paper is backup free safety, but Cam's kind of a ace of all. It's going into his 3rd year, so it's time. And there's really no opening right now, but he plays so many positions that one injury away from starting for a great length of time.
Jim Wexell, I've always been very impressed with you on how you've been able to sometimes get stories out that nobody else has. Like, for instance, with Ben Roethlisberger, why does he wear number 7? Everybody said, it's not John Elway. And you said, you know what? He's a really big James Bond fan. And that has a lot to do with it. That was your story. I remember that. And that showed...
I appreciate you remembering that.
That was...
One of his best friends from Findlay, Ohio told me that.
That was, that was an insight right there that I said, that's pretty good reporting right there, because I was trying to figure out why, unless you were just so an Ohio kid would like John Elway after all that he did against the Browns. I mean, I could never quite figure that one out, and all this, or for that matter, why in the town of Dan Marino it would be so celebrated in Pittsburgh, but that is neither here nor there. One thing, though, I did want to ask you about is the Steelers locker room, because Cody Sensabaugh, I asked you about earlier, he was on this show before the Jacksonville playoff game, and he once mentioned that the locker room here is like a family. Well, it's going to come out in the nationwide media that maybe it hasn't and all this. What is the locker room like with the Steelers? I mean, is it counterproductive to winning?
Oh, that locker room nonsense is just complete overdrive by the national media. I mean, this locker room is full of quality people, and Antonio Brown is just he's crazed. The Le'Veon Bell stuff is totally different. I mean, we could break that down, but he held out the entire season. So,
sure.
People want to conflate the two different problems they had last year, but Antonio Brown was as usual Antonio Brown. I want the ball, I want the ball, I want the ball, I want the ball. And even when you're tying the game after a big rally like they did against the Chiefs, this guy's over on the sideline throwing fits as you're tying the game. So it's not about winning and losing. He's just one of those crazy receivers that wants the ball all the time. And everybody gets that. Mm-hmm. Because he's really good. So let him go crazy over there in his corner locker room. Over here, in Roethlisberger's corner, he's got all the O-linemen. Marquise Pouncey's leader of the locker room. Next to him is Alejandro Villanueva, who has a Bronze Star and Medal of Valor. And so he's about 5th or 6th on your leadership board there in the Pittsburgh locker room, and he has a Bronze Star. So there's that. And their biggest guys, Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, Pouncey, Villanueva, Ramon Foster, Dave DeCastro, the biggest and strongest and most decorated, all pro-wise, are the linemen. This locker room is not a problem. It was not a problem. It was complete nonsense all year long. I was in the locker room, somebody said, there's a story breaking about We've always wanted to use plunder and pillage as sports writers, and so everybody started using plunder. I think I even used it, but that's what the word was. We didn't see it, and later I went over. I took a picture of Le'Veon's locker at the end of it, just to show people what happened, and all his stuff was in there. I don't even know where that story came from. So, and it's not going to end. And really, chemistry is going to depend on if you win. And then it's going to be a happy place. If you lose, it's going to be a mean place. So that's just how it goes.
Just between you and me, I've always thought there was a sensational element of the Pittsburgh media. Well, it's not between you and me because I am now saying it publicly, but I've always felt that way. Okay, having worked in it with you, Jim, yes, I have felt that, and so you've perhaps given us an example of that. Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was more national, though. I mean, I don't know that the Pittsburgh reporters did anything to quash it, but...
So you're saying the story came out from a national source, the Bell?
It's the fans, too. The fans are addicted to the drama, and they say they're not, but they're retweeting all that stuff and complaining, and I'm hearing, why aren't you doing this story? Like, I don't even see what's happening. I don't know what's happening. I'll ask Bouncy and Ben again about this. And, Ben has had his issues, same way Terry Bradshaw had his issues in an earlier time without all the social. They're both a bit melodramatic.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to say they're injured just so that you hang on and hear the story all week, and then they show up Sunday on game day to save the day. They both have that inner drama, melodramatic persona inside them. Both very similar personalities, Terry Bradshaw and Ben Roethlisberger.
Jim?
Ben's had some charges against him.
Mm-hmm.
That if you read the police report, you're going to say, I don't really see it. And then they talk about, what was the political, Comey came out. I'm not charging Hillary, but she was reckless, and she was this, and she was that. And you don't do that when you're not charging. Well, that's what the Georgia DA did to Ben. And that's what Comey reminded me of that Georgia DA that came out and said, I'm not charging him, but I don't like him. And he's, this and that, and he might be this, and he might be that. Well, that didn't help Ben.
No.
Apparently you didn't find enough, you didn't charge him. And regardless of all that, and I asked Troy Polamalu, that's great. What has Ben got to do to get your respect back? He goes, I just want to see how he handles this. It's always about how you get up off the floor. And then Ben got married, and he's raising a family, and he's trying to put all that behind him, and he's trying to do his best as a team guy and a media guy. And I have no problem. I've had problems with him in the past. We've had it out about what he felt was slanted coverage against him, and but we worked it out. And I've gained a respect for him, and I believe he's gained a respect for me. And I watch him deal with the national guys that feed off the rumors that Sterling Sharpen brings up on whatever round table he's sitting on TV, even though he's never been in the Steelers locker room. And then a national reporter will, Ben, what do you think of this? And Ben will get ticked off at that guy for asking a question that has nothing to do with what's in front of him or what's actually happening. And so Ben will get short with that guy, and then boom, he's got a reputation for being difficult to deal with.
Well,
I'm just not seeing it. I know Mike Tomlin works on. He gives the best players more freedom. Antonio Brown didn't have to stay at camp at night, but he was there on time the next day, like the rest of us. We're grown men. We don't have to stay in our dorm room together, do we? So Mike Tomlin would give some freedom, and that the player would then not be responsible with the freedom. So they would come back and make the coach look bad. So it's a good organization. It's a good locker room, and it will even be better if they start winning. That's how it always goes in every locker room.
Well, that's perhaps what Sensabaugh was talking about then on the show almost, I guess it's a year and a half ago. I will say my one dealing with Ben Roethlisberger, I did find him, this was very early in his career, to be prickly. And early in his career, he did have, a reputation, as you know, of being a bit immature. But that being said, some very good insights here. I do want to, it's one last question, though, about Hodges, who, of course, you wrote about there in Steel City Insider, Jim Wexell and such. You mentioned that Dobbs wasn't all that impressive during training or mini camp. What was impressive about Hodges that you saw?
Well, let's not get carried away.
Okay.
I'm not going to say he was that impressive.